media. Joining me now is Hugo Lowell, White House correspondent for The Guardian, and Angelo Carusone, president and CEO of Media Matters. Angelo, I'm going to start with you. Tell us more about this Curtis Yarvin fellow.
I'll start with something that people will know about, and the concept of a red pill. That's his. He came up with that term. And it is sort of the notion in the early 2000s of sort of, taking the red pill and seeing the light, seeing the ideology that he has inspired. And when he wrote about it, he was describing exactly what you heard in that clip, which is a process by which we sort of shed our phobia of dictators and we embrace the idea of a dictator or a CEO. And he has really started to push that notion. And obviously he's shied away from using the term dictator and is leaning into the concept of a CEO. But the fact is, and the reason I start there is that's only one example. He personally may not have a ton of influence individually, right? I mean, his relationships with some of these figures are probably overstated to a degree. But what's not overstated and what is significant is that he was like Johnny Appleseed of bad, crazy right-wing ideas, right? He spread these things around years and years and years ago, and they have germinated. Yeah. And now you have massive techno-billionaires who loved his notion of techno-feudalism and sort of this technocracy, saying, yeah, I can get behind this idea. Going out there as, a guy in your 40s or 50s and still pushing Ayn Rand seems a little strange, right? Yeah. But now you push this guy, which is basically the same concept, and it sounds much more authoritative.
Is it the idea that, you've got this right? They want certain things like tax cuts and deregulation, but they want to have like an intellectual firmament to it. They create these, sort of Claremont Institute sort of pseudo-intellectualism, right? And they want to put something. He provides that, like Steve Bannon. He didn't create the term alt-right. An actual neo-white supremacist created it. And then he said, I'm going to make Breitbart the home of the alt-right. Yep. And then they mainstreamed the idea of alt-right, which literally means white nationalism.
That's precisely it. And by putting it out there under the term of not just like something that is not sort of wrapped in hate, which a lot of these things tend to make their way into the zeitgeist, but rather as, an interesting thought piece. Yeah. Right? Say, oh, well, that's not so terrible. If he's just asking questions, he is just proposing these ideas. We should challenge ourselves to explore these concepts. And that's sort of the thing is it's sort of this veneer of thoughtfulness and intellectualism, but what it really is dictatorship, extremism, wrapped in sort of like serious thinking, and it's not.
And so Hugo, talk about who actually talks to Trump, because it doesn't seem like Jack Posobiec gets FaceTime with Trump, but his ideas obviously do, right? They get to Trump, or does he? I mean, like, who is actually feeding Trump his ideas?
I like to think of Trump world now as kind of concentric circles of relationships. Posobiec, for instance, is someone who has come out of kind of the War Room posse, the War Room alumni, and everyone in the War Room alumni talks to each other. So that's whether it's Bannon, Posobiec, Raheem Kassam, whether it's Kash Patel, for instance, was co-hosting Bannon's War Room.
And now he gets to run the FBI.
And now he's running the FBI and has a direct line to Trump. So that's one concentric circle. The other concentric circle, for instance, with kind of like Ukraine and Russia, and kind of we've seen this in recent days when Trump posted the Truth Social post that, Zelensky is a dictator, right? That wasn't necessarily because I think people in the Oval Office were like, yeah, let's do Putin a solid. It was more, the kind of conservatives who decided we don't like Zelensky, and kind of this group inside the White House is like, we need to hit back at Ukraine aid, and kind of conservatives in the House and the Freedom Caucus. And they all came together and thought, what's one way we can really hit back at Zelensky in a way that in a way that we know he won't appreciate? Oh, let's take this thing that he, doesn't have elections. By the way, that's only because there's martial law.
There's a war.
Right.
You can't have elections during a war.
Precisely. And so they kind of use these episodes to then inform, how can we get back at people? And so those are the kinds of people around. And then, of course, you have someone like Elon Musk, who, has been basically talking to Trump every single day.
And is thoroughly red-pilled at this point.
And he's becoming savvier, actually, at the way he interacts with Trump. I think early on in the administration, he didn't know necessarily like the structure of the White House, how it operated. He was running afoul, I think, of some personalities. He has become much more disciplined in recent days, and this is kind of our new reporting, is he has now started to run things by the Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, much more often, much more transparently. Recently they were traveling back from Florida, and he made sure to go tell Susie Wiles, hey, I'm going to go talk to the president. Do you want to come with me? And in doing so, he endears himself to West Wing aides. He's building up alliances inside the West Wing so that what he is now proposing and what he, feeds Trump, like, oh, this is what Doge is. We've cut $8 billion today, whatever it is. That carries more legitimacy because everyone else in the White House is like, yeah, Elon.
They've been bought in. Right. I mean, so CPAC is today, obviously, right? Yep. So you have a lot of Republicans there. Weirdly enough, the Attorney General of the United States is at CPAC, which is very strange. But it's not just that Trump has been red-pilled by all of these ideas, these really far-right ideas that would have been considered too far gone for the Republican Party even 5-10 years ago. the whole Republican Party's been brought into it. And somebody like a Ted Cruz, who would be a hawk, or Marco Rubio, who was like a Russia hawk, they either have to fake it or they really believe it.
Yep. And this is the part that I think is very disturbing, because one of the things that's happened within the Republican Party is that over the years, because of Trump and because of his relationships to these right-wing figures, these extreme right-wing figures, they organized and built political power on what used to be considered the fringes.
Right.
And when you bring those people into the political fold, and you actually build power on them, you now have to maintain that power, which is why you're, one, they could be genuinely hopped up on some of these ideas. And on the other hand, people that may not be don't really have a choice. They're held captive, because that is where the political center of gravity is now. And it's not that disconnected. What we talk about with Curtis Yarvin or Jack Posobiec, who's tied into Charlie Kirk now, who's deeply embedded with the administration. He's flying with the vice president.
Right.
There's a reason J.D. Vance today at CPAC talks about, so men need to be men. It's okay, everybody. You should not feel bad even if you're kind of a bad guy.
Right. Because
it's okay. That is he's speaking to these audiences. And that's the real thing that helps partly explain what's happening these days, is that they've brought these people in and now they are continuing to serve them. So they don't care about what popular opinion is anymore. They're speaking very specifically to a rabid, highly engaged, highly energized core that is reflective very much of what Jack Posobiec does every day, what Curtis Yarvin believes, what you see in Elon Musk's Twitter feed. That is who they're speaking to. It's a fundamentally anti-democratic, notion of how you govern.
And the thing about it is, if you're governing that way and you're locking yourself in, I mean, they're even like, we won't even allow anyone in the administration to read the New York Times or the Associated Press. They all have to read Breitbart or whatever it is. They've now locked themselves in. That's all they've got. The polls show that this isn't popular broadly, but they don't seem to care about that, which leads me to think they aren't worried about elections. They aren't thinking about trying to have popular support or the public will. They don't care.
I think that's fair, and I think, who knows where that road
leads. Where that goes, yeah.
But I think, what is important to take away, and this is not just at the White House, it's at the Justice Department, this is at other agencies, is everything that this executive branch is doing has to be viewed through whether or not it's going to advance the Trump administration's political agenda. And if you indulge me for a moment with the Justice Department, because I just think it's so acute over there, what Emil Bove, the acting Deputy Attorney General, is doing is recalibrating the Justice Department, having this new praxis there whereby prosecutorial decisions are now going to be based and balanced on what the Trump administration's political priorities are.
Right.
You saw this with the Adams case.
What's going to play on X Twitter?
Right, and kind of, does this advance Trump's, immigration crackdown, or does this advance, Elon Musk and Doge's ability to, cut government grants that have already been, or contracts that have already been, set out? And the reason that is happening is because they have all bought into this idea that of the unitary executive, where Trump controls all of the executive branch agencies. And I think there is no way you can shame. I think this is kind of what people have to grapple with. You can't shame Trump or the Trump administration into changing course.
Yeah.
Resignations, whether it's 7 resignations, they don't care. They will just go to the next person down the rung. They will find someone to do it. And same with Emil Bove, by the way. If he wasn't the one carrying out these directives, he will be fired, and they will find someone else to do it. And so I think the approach has to be that this is how the Trump is going.
Yeah. I want to ask, I have some more questions, but you guys are going to come back. We're going to do more of this. Hugo Lowell, Angelo Carasone, thank you both very much.